The sky was quiet that night, filled with stars, cold winds, and silence. In a secret underground lab beneath the Nevada desert, alarms suddenly began to ring. A strange object had entered Earth's orbit. Fast, silent, and without warning, no one knew what it was. And it wasn't answering any signals. Some thought it was a missile. Some thought it was a rock. But it wasn't falling. It was landing, slowly and carefully, like something intelligent. Was inside. At 2:14 a.m., it touched down in the desert, glowing dim blue, pulsing like a heartbeat. Within minutes, a team of soldiers and scientists surrounded it. Weapons ready, cameras on. Dr. Marcus, head of the research unit, gave the order, open it. The outer shell hissed as it opened, and inside was something no one had expected, a girl. She looked about 18 in human years, her skin pale silver, hair soft white, and eyes shut. Her body was thin and covered in strange symbols glowing faintly. She wasn't breathing like a human, but she was alive, barely. They rushed her inside, placed her in a containment room, and began running tests. Everything about her was strange. Even her heartbeat was slower than any known species. But the biggest shock came when she opened her eyes. She looked around, not with fear, but with sadness, deep, painful sadness. Then she spoke in perfect English, her voice soft and calm. "My name is Alira," she said, "and I don't have much time." The room froze. Scientists stared. No one spoke. "How do you speak our language?" Dr. Marcus asked. "I've been listening," she replied. "Your broadcasts, your music, your pain." They asked her many questions. Where was she from? Why was she here? What did she want? She answered only one. "Before I die, I want to feel human love." The scientists looked at each other, confused and uncomfortable. "This is not a refugee," one soldier said. "This is a trick." But Alira did not resist. She didn't fight. She only closed her eyes again and whispered. 7 days, they placed her in a medical unit and locked the doors. Cameras watched her every second. Dr. Marcus called in a special advisor, Evan Reed, a young scientist who had worked on alien linguistics and human emotion studies. Evan had no interest in the project at first. He believed aliens were dangerous, unpredictable, and not worth saving. But when he saw Alira on the screen, something in her eyes caught him, not danger, but pain. He entered her room the next morning, holding a tablet and keeping his distance. She looked at him, smiled faintly, and said, "You've lost someone too." Evan paused, surprised. "How do you know that?" "I can feel it," she replied. "Your heart carries silence." He didn't reply. Instead, he turned to leave. But she asked softly, "Do you believe in love?" He stopped at the door. "What kind of question is that?" "The kind I must ask," she said, "because that's all I came for." Evan spent the next hours reviewing her body scans, her brain activity, her blood. Nothing matched human biology. But her emotions were real: fear, curiosity, and something else: longing. Alira's brain was partially telepathic, able to sense and reflect human emotions like a mirror. That night, as Evan sat watching her sleep through the glass, he remembered something: a girl he once loved, who died in an accident 3 years ago. He had buried that part of himself since then. But Alira somehow had touched it within seconds. The next morning, she was weaker, coughing, glowing less. Dr. Marcus wanted to run experiments, test emotional simulations on her to collect data. Evan stood up and said, "She's not a lab rat. She's dying. What do you suggest we do? Give her a love story?" Marcus replied with a smirk. Evan looked at Alira through the glass and said, "Maybe that's exactly what we should do." Alira watched them, her eyes calm, as if she already knew what they were saying. Then she whispered once more, 7 days, that's all I have. I don't want to die with nothing inside me." And with that, the first day ended. A dying alien girl had come across stars. Not for war, not for invasion, but for one simple, impossible desire: to understand human love. What no one knew yet was that her arrival would change the fate of one man, one planet, and maybe even one galaxy, because love once shared never truly dies, and for Alira, this was only the beginning. Asterisk, the human contact silence filled the cold lab as Alira stared at the ceiling. For hours, she hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, only listened, not to voices, but to feelings. She could hear the footsteps of soldiers above her, the whispers of the scientists. But more than that, she could feel their fear. It was heavy, loud, and sharp like broken glass. But then something changed. A new presence entered the lab. Not afraid, not cold, just numb. Alira sat up slowly, her silver eyes glowing faintly, and smiled. "He's here," she whispered. "The one with the quiet heart." Outside her glass room, Evan Reed stood still, watching her like she was a ghost. He didn't want to be. Here, not really. He hated projects like this. Too much mystery, too much risk, too much emotion. But something about her was pulling at him. Not because she was alien, but because she didn't feel like one. She looked up and said calmly, "Hello." "Evan." He blinked, surprised. "You know my name?" "I heard it," she said. "In someone's mind." He stepped closer. "You're telepathic?" "Only a little," she smiled. "I don't read thoughts, I feel them." Evan stayed quiet, studying her, searching for tricks, but Alira didn't lie, he could tell. Her sadness was too real to be fake. "Why did you come here?" he finally asked. She looked at him for a long second, then replied, "To find something your people have, and mine never did." Evan crossed his arms. "You said love, but why now? Why Earth?" Alira placed a hand on her chest. "Because I'm dying, and I don't want to fade without knowing what it feels like to matter to someone." Evan's mouth tightened. "You expect someone to fall in love with you in a week?" She nodded softly. "Maybe not love me, but feel something real for me." Evan didn't know what to say, so he left, but he didn't sleep that night. He kept thinking about her words, her eyes, and the strange calm in her voice. The next day, he returned to her room, this time without the tablet, without the lab coat. "Do you dream?" he asked. Suddenly, Alira smiled. "Yes, and I think last night I dreamed of you." Evan sat down across from her, confused. "What did you see?" "You," she said, "standing in the rain, crying without tears, holding something you couldn't fix." He froze, heart racing, because he had that dream 3 years ago. After his girlfriend died, she had drowned in a flood while trying to save a child. Evan had blamed himself every day since. "How did you?" he began, but she interrupted. "I told you. I don't read minds, I feel the echoes." Alira placed a hand near the glass. "You carry sorrow like armor. It protects you, but it also keeps you empty." Evan looked away, shaken. "You still haven't told me why you helped me," she said gently. "I didn't," he replied quickly. "I just stopped them from hurting you." "Same thing," she smiled. "Thank you." That evening, Dr. Marcus arrived with a new plan, an emotional simulation chamber, where Alira would be shown artificial scenes of love. "Purely for research," Marcus said. "We can learn so much from how she reacts." Evan felt a knot in his stomach. "You want to feed her fake feelings like a machine. She's not human." Marcus replied, "She doesn't need real emotions." But Evan wasn't sure anymore. He looked at Alira, then said, "Let me spend one day with her, outside the lab, just one." Marcus frowned. "Why?" "Because you'll never learn what love is by faking it," Evan said. "Let her experience something real." That night, against protocol, Evan took Alira out of the lab. Under the dark sky filled with stars, she walked barefoot on the grass, touched trees, laughed at the cold wind on her face. Then it began to rain, gentle and soft. Alira tilted her face upward and closed her eyes. "So this is what sadness tastes like," she whispered. "Wet, soft and quiet." Evan smiled for the first time in years, watching her dance in the rain like a child. Then she stopped and looked at him seriously. "Thank you for today," she said. This was my first memory worth keeping." But just then, her knees buckled and she fell. Evan caught her, panic rising. Her skin flickered. glowing weaker than before. "I'm fine," she said weakly. "It's just my body is remembering that I don't belong here." Evan held her close as the rain continued to fall. For the first time, he didn't feel like a scientist or a man haunted by his past. He just felt human, and that was enough. But deep inside, a question was growing. If Alira was already fading this fast, how many moments like this were left? The experiment, she was floating, not in water, not in space, but in memory. Alira drifted through flickers of human emotion, laughter in a playground, a mother's touch, a kiss in the dark. They weren't hers, not yet, but she was tasting them, like distant colors in the wind. Then everything turned white, bright lights, cold voices, and the sound of machines brought her back. She opened her eyes, weak, confused, and saw glass walls, wires in her skin. Evan was gone. And in his place were scientists in white coats. Dr. Marcus stood behind the glass, arms crossed, expression hard. "Begin emotional simulation," he ordered. A screen flickered on, showing images, a boy hugging his dog, a wedding dance, a dying grandfather holding hands with his granddaughter. Artificial voices whispered words like love, loss, joy, fear. Alira's body began to tremble. Not from pain, but from the overwhelming emptiness of it all. "These are shadows," she whispered, "not feelings." But they didn't hear her, or didn't care. She was the experiment now. No longer a guest, not even a patient, just a subject in a cage. Meanwhile, Evan was pounding on the security door upstairs, furious. "You said one day," he shouted. "You promised I'd have a choice." Dr. Marcus appeared on the screen calmly. "And your day ended, Reed. Now we gather data." "This isn't data. This is torture," Evan snapped. "She can't handle this. Her brain is wired for real connection." "She's alien," Marcus said coldly. "She survive, or she won't." Evan ran, bypassed clearance, and broke into the lab on level 4 when Alira saw him. Her eyes lit up weakly. "You came back." Without a word, Evan shut off the projector, pulled the wires from her skin, and lifted her into his arms. Alarms blared, guards shouted, but none dared shoot. She was too valuable. Evan escaped with her through a side exit he memorized months ago, but never thought he'd use. Rain poured outside again, like the sky was crying for her. They hid in an old observatory at the edge of the base, where no one had visited in years. Inside, Evan wrapped her in a blanket and whispered, "I'm sorry. I should never have left you." Alira looked up with weak eyes. "I felt you were gone. And it hurt more than anything the machines showed me." "I didn't know they would," Evan started, but she placed a finger on his lips. She said softly, "It wasn't your fault, and I forgive you." Then, with a slow breath, she sat up and said something that made Evan freeze. "I want to show you something," she whispered, "the way my kind used to share truth." She reached out and gently touched his forehead, and suddenly, Evan was inside her memory. He saw her world, a shining city floating above clouds, cold and beautiful, filled with beings of perfect knowledge and zero emotion. He saw Alira as a child, different, punished for crying, isolated for asking about feelings. He saw her escape during the fall of her world, carrying only one message she had found on an ancient Earth satellite, a song about love. Then it ended, and they were back in the observatory, both shaking, both breathless. Evan stared at her, stunned. "You ran away from a dying world, just to feel love?" "Yes," she said, "because I believed it was real, and I wanted to prove it, even if I only had 1 week." For the first time, Evan didn't see her as alien, or fragile, or strange. He saw her as brave. And maybe, just maybe, he was starting to feel something more than empathy. Outside, the storm passed. But inside, something had just begun. Alira leaned on Evan's shoulder and whispered, "That simulation earlier. It showed love as images, but with you, I felt it. Even for a moment." Evan didn't speak. He only held her hand. It was warm, trembling, real. But deep in the night, Alira's skin began to flicker again. Her cells were breaking down faster than expected. Her time was running out. Still, she smiled through the pain, because now she wasn't alone. She had seen a real emotion reflected in human eyes, and for her, that was more than science, more than survival, it was meaning. The connection he had never dreamed in alien symbols before, but now they danced in his sleep, glowing patterns, soft voices, and memories that were not his own. Evan woke up in the observatory's dusty corner, heart racing, breath shallow. Beside him, Alira was still asleep, glowing faintly under a blanket of stars shining through the broken glass roof. Something had changed, he could feel it in his bones, like part of her had slipped into his mind while he slept. Not just images, but emotions, raw and honest. Sat up slowly, staring at her, not with curiosity anymore, but with something deeper, something he didn't want to name just yet. Across the room, Alira's eyes opened without warning. "I saw your memory," she whispered. The girl by the river, the scream, the silence after. Evan's heart stopped. That was the moment his girlfriend had died. "I didn't mean to enter it," Alira said gently. "It called to me while you were dreaming. I only listened." Evan looked away, ashamed. "I never talk about her." "You don't have to," Alira replied. "Pain speaks loud enough." She reached out and gently touched his wrist, and suddenly, the room fell quiet, like the universe had taken a breath. It wasn't a physical touch, it was a connection, a fusion of feeling, shared with no words, no noise, just presence. Evan saw flashes of Alira's past again, but now it was different. He didn't just see her memories, he felt them. He felt her loneliness as a child, the cold rejection from her own kind, the terror of floating through space alone, and the hope she carried when she heard a human song about love for the very first time. He pulled back, gasping, overwhelmed. "You don't just feel," he whispered. "You share." Alira nodded. "It's called empathic linking, a rare ability. In my species, one they feared, because emotion makes logic unpredictable. And that's why you were hunted?" Evan asked. "Yes," she said. "But it's also why I survived." Outside, a low rumble echoed across the desert. Helicopters. The military had found them. "We don't have much time," Evan said. "They'll take you back, or worse." "Don't want to run anymore," Alira said calmly. "But there is something I must give you first." "What is it?" he asked. She hesitated, then said, "A part of me." Evan frowned. "What do you mean?" Alira stood, unsteady but focused, and placed her palm over her heart. "When my people bonded emotionally, truly bonded, we could give each other fragments of our essence," she said. "Not thoughts, not memories, but something deeper. Something that lives inside. But why give that to me?" Evan asked, confused. "Because you made me feel more human than any simulation ever could," she whispered. "And I want that piece of me to live even after I'm gone." The doors of the observatory rattled from impact. Searchlights filled the room. Soldiers shouted outside, "Come out with your hands up." Evan turned to Alira, panic in his eyes. "Go," she said softly. "I'll hold them off." "I'm not leaving you," Evan replied, his voice breaking, but she smiled, the same sad, beautiful smile she always had. "You already carry me," she said, touching his chest lightly. "Right here." Then the room exploded in white light as the military stormed in. Evan screamed her name, but by the time he opened his eyes, the only thing left in the center of the room was light. Pure, silent, glowing light, fading slowly into nothing. They took Evan in for questioning, kept him under watch, but they never found Alira again. No body, no signal, no trace, just a memory burned into his soul. But something strange happened after that. Evan began dreaming in color again. He could feel emotions deeper than before. He noticed things, like the sadness in a stranger's eyes, or the quiet fear in a child's silence. And sometimes, when he was alone, he could hear a whisper, not in his ears but in his heart. "I'm still here," she would say. "As long as you feel, I live." And he believed it, because the connection they shared wasn't science, wasn't a lie, it was truth. Alira had given him something eternal, something Human, something alien, something called love. The secret, the mirror didn't lie, but Evan still didn't believe it. He stood in his bathroom at 2:47 a.m., shirt half unbuttoned, eyes wide, heart pounding. His reflection blinked when he blinked, breathed when he breathed, but something was off. His veins, they were glowing, faintly blue, like tiny rivers of starlight moving beneath his skin. It had started 3 days after Elira vanished. At first, he thought it was just in his head, a trick from grief, stress, or maybe guilt, but then the dreams returned. Clearer this time, with symbols, not just feelings. He could see equations that didn't belong to any human science, memories of places that didn't exist on Earth. And sometimes, when he touched metal, it bent slightly under his fingers. Not with strength, but with intention. Something inside him was changing, not just mentally, not emotionally, but physically. Elira hadn't just left him with a memory. She had left him with a piece of herself, and now it was waking up. Evan returned to the abandoned observatory that morning, the place where everything began. He sat beneath the broken skylight and closed his eyes, and she was there again, not in form, not in voice, but in presence. Her warmth flowed through his chest like soft waves, familiar and gentle. "You feel it now," a whisper echoed in his mind. "Don't be afraid." He opened his eyes and looked up at the sky. "I'm not afraid," he whispered. "I just don't know what I'm becoming." Later that day, Evan returned to the lab, not as a prisoner, but as someone who demanded answers. He barged into Dr. Marcus's office and threw a handful of blood scan reports onto the desk. "You knew something like this could happen, didn't you?" He snapped. Marcus looked up, calm and cold as ever. "What are you talking about?" "I'm changing," Evan said. "Look at the cell data, the mutations, the neural pathways, the energy readings." Marcus picked up the reports, eyes scanning fast. "You're not just showing signs of alien exposure," he murmured. "You're merging." Evan slammed his hand on the desk. "She bonded with me, and now I'm not fully human anymore, am I?" The silence between them grew heavier. "You don't understand what this means," Marcus finally said. "This could be the key to evolution, a hybrid of human empathy and alien intelligence." Evan stepped back, disgusted. "You're not thinking about what it means for me. You're thinking about what it means for you." "I want to run more tests," Marcus said. "If we can map your changes, we can replicate the process." "No," Evan said firmly. "This wasn't a lab experiment. It was a gift, and I won't let you turn it into a weapon." He turned and walked out before Marcus could respond. That night, Evan stood on his balcony, staring at the stars. He didn't feel like he was losing himself. Strangely, he felt more complete than ever. He could still remember Elira's laughter, the way she spoke of feelings like they were treasures. And now he felt every heartbeat in the world, just a little more. He could walk past a stranger and feel their sorrow, touch a dying plant and feel its thirst. He was becoming something new. But what frightened him wasn't the change. It was the realization that he might not be the only one. Somewhere out there, Elira's people had feared this gift so much they destroyed it. But she had passed it on to a human, and if it could live in him, it could spread, not like a virus, but like hope. That night, Evan made a decision. He opened his laptop, logged into a secure satellite network, and began writing. Not a report, not a journal, but a message, a beacon for anyone, human or not, who had ever felt alone, different, broken, or afraid of emotion. His message was short, but powerful. "If you can feel what I feel, you're not alone." And with a single press of a button, the message was sent across Earth, across satellites, and far beyond, into the silence between stars, where maybe, just maybe, someone was listening, someone. Like Elira once was alone, fading, searching for love. Asterisk, the choice he didn't expect anyone to answer, but someone did. 3 days after Evan sent the message into space, a reply came, not through radio, not through sound, but through him. It was like a soft voice inside his bones, a whisper without words, We heard her, we feel you. The seed lives. He dropped to his knees, heart racing, mind spinning. It was real. Elira's people, or what was left of them, had heard him. But they weren't reaching out with kindness. They were afraid, not of Evan himself, but of what he was becoming. His human soul, now mixed with Elira's essence, was something forbidden among her kind. A cross between emotion and evolution. And in their eyes, it was dangerous. Later that night, a new signal arrived. This time from Earth, encrypted, military, urgent. Dr. Marcus had issued a global warning. Evan Reed was no longer human, and he was to be detained immediately, not studied, not protected, contained. Evan went dark, vanished from cameras, from grids, from satellites, but not from hearts, because across the world, people had seen his message. Thousands messaged back. People who felt too deeply, who dreamed too much, who had always believed emotion was not weakness but power, and they believed in him. Evan stood in an abandoned train tunnel, somewhere in Eastern Europe. The air cold, the walls damp, but his heart burning bright. He had a choice now, hide forever, or rise with what Elira had given him. That night, as wind echoed through the tunnel, he spoke aloud, not knowing if she could still hear him. "I was broken before you," he whispered. "Now I'm more than I ever was, and they want to take it away." Silence, then, like a memory returning to breath. He heard her voice, soft, steady, familiar. "You are the first bridge," she said, "between what was and what could be. Don't let fear make your choice." And just like that, he knew what he had to do. The next day, Evan walked right into the Geneva World Council building, unarmed, unafraid. Security moved in instantly. Guns raised, lights flashing. But he raised his hand and said just one sentence. "I have something that belongs to all of us." Inside the room, he showed them, not with science, not with tests, but with emotion. He touched the hand of a dying ambassador, and the man gasped as images flowed into his mind. His childhood, his lost wife, the feeling of holding his daughter's hand for the first time. Not memories stolen, but feelings returned. Evan had become a mirror for the human soul. And now he wasn't just carrying Elira's gift, he was offering it. But with that gift came a cost. The mutation inside him was accelerating. His cells were burning too brightly, his mind stretching beyond the limits of a human brain. He had days left, maybe hours, and so the final choice stood before him. Let the power fade with him, peacefully and quietly, or pass it on. And let the world feel what Elira once came here to find. Love, connection, truth. He stared at the glass reflection of himself. Glowing veins, tired eyes, but a peaceful smile. Then he turned to the council and said, "I don't want to be remembered for changing science. I want to be remembered for proving something greater, that emotion can save, not destroy." The council was silent, unsure, divided. But before they could vote, a beam of white light descended from the sky outside the building. A ship, sleek, silent, ancient, had arrived. Elira's people had come, not to kill, not to invade, but to judge, and they had one question for Evan, delivered through telepathic voice. "Will you let this seed spread?" Evan looked around, at the frightened leaders, at the hopeful crowd outside, at the stars he once feared, and he nodded slowly. "Yes," he said. "Let them feel what she felt." The light grew brighter, surrounding him, not ending, transforming. As the world watched, Evan Reed vanished in a soft burst of light, not dying, not escaping, but becoming, the first of a new kind, a spark of both heart and star. The new beginning. He was gone, no body, no ashes, no grave, just a memory carried in wind and light. For days the world searched for answers. Was Evan Reed taken, transformed, erased, or ascended? The council gave no statement. The military stayed silent. But the people, they already knew, because something had changed across the globe. Strangers began to feel a strange warmth inside them. Not fire, not sickness, but connection. In hospitals, terminal patients spoke of hearing loved ones. Final thoughts. In cities, angry crowds paused, confused by sudden empathy toward one another. In the quiet corners of forgotten places, lonely people looked at the sky and smiled, as if someone up there had whispered, "You're not alone." Elira's gift, now carried by Evan, had not vanished, it had spread, not like a virus, but like a song, one that played not in ears, but in hearts. Months passed, and a small foundation appeared online. No headquarters, no advertisements, no leaders, just a glowing symbol, a hand, reaching toward a star, and beneath it, 2 words, the bridge. People who felt too deeply, people once broken by emotion, began to gather. Artists, teachers, veterans, orphans, scientists, all drawn by something they couldn't explain. They didn't follow Evan, they continued him. And somewhere in the quiet of the universe, something watched them grow. Elira's people, once cold and perfect, now stood at a crossroads. They had witnessed a single hybrid change an entire planet, not with fear or logic, but with feeling. For the first time in their long history, they asked themselves a forbidden question. What if we were wrong about love? Back on Earth, a girl named Mina sat on her rooftop, sketching stars. She had never met Evan, never heard of Elira, but she often dreamed of places she'd never seen. Floating cities, glowing forests, skies full of songs, and in her dreams, a voice whispered, "Keep feeling. It makes you more than you know." One night, a single star above her blinked blue, then red, then blue again, like a heartbeat. She smiled and whispered, "Good night, whoever you are." Somewhere, far beyond light and silence, a presence stirred, not a ghost, not a god, just a boy who had once been human, now made of memory and meaning. He smiled, because the message had been received. The girl on the rooftop, the man in the hospital, the boy with tears in his eyes, they were ready. The world was ready, not for war, not for peace treaties or technology, but for a new kind of future, one built on shared emotion, one where feeling deeply was no longer a flaw, but a superpower. And so, the story of Elira and Evan did not end in a lab or in the stars. It lived on in every heartbeat that dared to love without fear, every soul brave enough to connect, and every voice that said, "I understand you, because I feel it too." This was the new beginning, not just for humans, not just for aliens, but for something bigger, a bridge between hearts, across galaxies, across time. And all it took was one dying girl's final request, to be loved before she was gone.